The classroom floated in the void of space, suspended inside the massive Galactic research station Meridian. Through the transparent walls, stars stretched endlessly in every direction, their light casting a soft glow across the assembled students. Professor Kelrin stood at the front of the room, his silver scales catching the starlight as his forearms moved gracefully over the holographic controls. He was a Vexian, one of the oldest and most respected species in the galactic community, and his reputation as a master of ancient languages had brought students from across known space to study under him. Today's lesson focused on the most mysterious artifact ever discovered. The crystalline tablet hung suspended in the center of the room, projected in perfect detail so every student could examine it closely. The tablet itself rested in a secure vault 3 levels below, but this hologram captured every scratch, every curve, every strange symbol etched into its surface. The original had been found on a desolate moon in the outer rim, buried under layers of rock that dated back millions of years. No one knew who created it or what civilization had left it behind. Thrin leaned forward on his 6 legs, his compound eyes reflecting the glowing symbols. The insectoid researcher had spent weeks analyzing the mathematical patterns in the script, searching for any logical structure that might provide a key to translation. Beside him, Mirasol floated in her specialized water tank, her translucent form pulsing with different colors as she tried to sense emotional context in the writing. Zeph hovered near the ceiling, a being of pure energy contained within a shimmering field, his consciousness probing the patterns for anything his unique perspective might reveal. Professor Kelrin gestured to a particular section of the tablet. Notice how these symbols repeat in groups of 3, yet their meaning seems to shift based on position, he explained in his melodic voice, automatically translated into each student's native language through their neural implants. We have identified 17 distinct characters, but they combine in ways that suggest hundreds of possible meanings. This is unlike any known language system. The class had been studying this tablet for 3 full cycles now. They had tried every known method of linguistic analysis. They had compared it to databases containing thousands of dead languages from hundreds of worlds. They had run probability algorithms and pattern-matching programs. Nothing worked. The symbols remained stubbornly indecipherable, beautiful but meaningless. The door to the classroom slid open with a soft hiss. Jake Morrison walked in carrying a datapad, his footsteps quiet on the polished floor. He was human, one of the newest species to join the galactic community. Humans had only achieved faster-than-light travel 20 years ago, stumbling into a galaxy already populated by hundreds of advanced civilizations. Most aliens viewed them with friendly condescension, seeing them as enthusiastic children eager to learn, but lacking the sophistication of the elder races. Jake worked as a liaison officer on the station, a job that mostly involved delivering supply manifests, coordinating shipments, and handling administrative tasks that the more advanced species found beneath their attention. He was young, maybe 30 standard years, with short brown hair and an easy smile that made him popular among the station's support staff. The academic researchers barely noticed him most days. He was just another human doing simple work while the real scholars pursued knowledge. He approached Professor Kelrin's desk, datapad extended. "Sorry to interrupt, Professor," he said quietly. "Just need your signature on the equipment requisition forms." His voice carried the slight accent common to humans from the North American region of Earth, though the translation implant smoothed most of it away for the alien students. Professor Kelrin took the pad with one hand, while continuing to lecture with his other 3. Jake waited patiently, his eyes wandering around the classroom as the professor explained something complex about contextual symbol variation. The holographic tablet rotated slowly in the center of the room, and Jake's gaze fell upon it. He stared at the symbols for a moment, his head tilting slightly to one side. The professor finished signing and handed back the datapad, but Jake did not move. He was still looking at the tablet, his expression shifting from curiosity to confusion to something like recognition. The students began to notice his attention, several turning to see what had captured the human's interest. Thrin's antennae twitched with curiosity. Jake took a step closer to the projection, his eyes tracking along the lines of symbols. His lips moved slightly as if he were reading silently to himself. Professor Kelrin paused his lecture, watching the human with mild interest. Humans often found alien artifacts fascinating, though they rarely understood what they were looking at. "Is something wrong, Mr. Morrison?" the professor asked politely. Jake glanced at him, then back at the tablet. He hesitated, seeming uncertain. "Why are you reading my words?" The classroom fell completely silent. Even the soft hum of the station's life support system seemed to fade away. Professor Kelren's translator implant flickered as if malfunctioning, trying to make sense of what it had just heard. Mirasol's colors shifted to a confused purple. Zeph's energy field pulsed erratically. "I'm sorry?" Professor Kelren said carefully. "Could you repeat that?" Jake looked uncomfortable now, aware that every eye in the room was fixed on him. "The tablet," he said, gesturing toward it. "That's English. It says, let me see." He stepped closer, squinting slightly at the stylized script. "It says June 15th, 2847. Today we landed on the most beautiful moon I have ever seen. The sky is violet at sunset and the hills roll like waves on an ocean. Captain Rodriguez thinks this could be our first permanent colony outside the home galaxy. I miss Earth, I miss my mom and dad and my little brother. But standing here watching our ships come down from orbit, I think maybe this place could become something wonderful. This could be humanity's legacy among the stars." Signed, Catherine Wells. The silence stretched for a long moment. Then Professor Kelren made a sound that his species used to express complete bewilderment. "That is impossible," he said flatly. "This tablet is 4.7 million years old. We have verified its age through 17 different dating methods. Humans did not exist 4.7 million years ago. Your species achieved sentience approximately 200,000 years ago according to your own evolutionary records." Jake shrugged helplessly. "I don't know what to tell you, Professor. But that's definitely English. The script is really decorative, kind of old-fashioned calligraphy style. But it's readable once you get used to it." Thrin clicked his mandibles together rapidly, his species equivalent of nervous laughter. "The human is confused," he said to the others. "Pattern recognition error. He sees familiar shapes in random symbols. This is common in developing species, but Professor Kelren was not so quick to dismiss it. He had spent 300 years studying languages, and he recognized certainty when he heard it. This human was not guessing or hoping. He was reading. "Mr. Morrison," the professor said slowly, "could you read more of the tablet? Other sections?" Jake nodded and moved around the hologram, examining different parts of the inscribed surface. "This part here talks about setting up hydroponics gardens. This section is about someone named Derek, who keeps making jokes about the local wildlife. Here's a technical note about solar panel efficiency." He paused at another section, his expression softening. "This part is a poem. It's not very good, honestly, but it's about missing home and finding new homes. It's kind of sweet." Mirasol's colors had shifted to bright yellow, indicating excitement or alarm. "Professor, if the human is correct, then everything we thought we knew about this artifact is wrong." Professor Kelren's 4 hands moved rapidly over his controls, recording everything Jake said. "Mr. Morrison, I need you to translate the entire tablet. Every word, every symbol. Can you do that?" Jake looked at the massive amount of text covering the crystalline surface. "That's going to take a while, Professor. Maybe a few hours?" "Take as long as you need," Professor Kelren said. His voice had changed from the patient tone of a teacher to the sharp focus of a researcher who had just stumbled onto something extraordinary. Class dismissed. "All of you, not a word of this to anyone until we verify what we are dealing with. Mr. Morrison, please sit down and begin." As the students filed out in stunned silence, Jake settled into a chair in front of the hologram, datapad ready. Professor Kelren stood beside him, all 4 hands trembling slightly with anticipation or fear. The human began to read, his voice calm and steady, speaking words that had been written millions of years before his species had learned to make fire. Somewhere in the galaxy, reality had broken in a way that should not be possible, and somehow, impossibly, the answer was written in a dead woman's journal in simple, beautiful English. The news spread through the Galactic Council like wildfire, despite Professor Kelren's attempts at secrecy. Within 2 days, every major government in known space had heard the impossible story. A human liaison officer had read an ancient tablet that predated his entire species by millions of years. The tablet was written in his native language and described events that would not happen for another 600 years. The implications were staggering enough that the council called an emergency session for the first time in 40 years. Jake Morrison found himself sitting in a conference room that made him deeply uncomfortable. The chamber was enormous, designed to accommodate representatives from species of every size and shape. The ceiling stretched up so high that clouds actually formed near the top. Delegate platforms floated at different levels, each one customized for its occupants' environmental needs. Jake sat at a small human-sized table near the floor, feeling like an insect at a gathering of giants. Beside him sat Dr. Lisa Hayes, a human historian and linguist who had been rushed to the station from Earth as soon as the news broke. She was in her early 40s with gray streaking through her dark hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had spent the entire trip reading Jake's translation of the tablet, cross-referencing every detail against human historical records and linguistic databases. Her conclusion matched his. The writing was authentic English from sometime in the late 29th century, using grammatical structures and vocabulary that had not yet evolved but followed logical progression from current trends. On Jake's other side sat Commander Ben Foster, a military officer who had arrived with Dr. Hayes. He was tall and solid, with the careful posture of someone trained to assess threats. His presence confused Jake at first until Lisa explained that the government wanted military perspective on what this discovery might mean for humanity's security. If humans could somehow affect the past, could other species do the same? Could this be a weapon? Ben had said little during the journey, but his eyes constantly scanned the room, cataloging exits and potential dangers. The council chamber filled with delegates. The Vexian representative coiled on her platform, her scales a deeper gold than Professor Kelren's. The Threen delegate looked like a floating crystal, refracting light in impossible directions. The Kafar ambassador sat in a tank of methane, his tentacles occasionally pressing against the transparent walls. Dozens of other species, each stranger than the last, all turning their attention toward the small human delegation. The Vexian representative spoke first, her voice amplified throughout the chamber. "We have gathered to address an unprecedented situation. The artifact known as the Meridian Tablet has been dated conclusively to 4.7 million years before the present. Yet humans who achieved space travel mere decades ago claim to read it as if it were written yesterday. We must determine if this is deception, delusion, or something far more troubling." A delegate that looked like animated smoke drifted forward. "The humans are new to the galaxy. Perhaps they seek attention or status through elaborate fraud. We should not waste the Council's time on such matters." Dr. Hayes stood, her voice steady despite addressing beings that could crush her civilization without effort. "With respect, fraud is impossible. We did not create the tablet. We did not know of its existence until 3 days ago. We have no technology capable of creating an object that would pass your dating methods. The only logical conclusion is that the tablet is exactly what it appears to be. A journal entry written by a human woman named Catherine Wells in the year 2847. Then explain how this is possible," the Threen delegate said, its voice like breaking glass. "Your species did not exist when this tablet was created. You did not have written language. You did not have civilization. You were not even the dominant species on your own world." Ben Foster spoke for the first time, his military training evident in his concise delivery. "We cannot explain it, but we can verify it. Dr. Hayes has analyzed the linguistic patterns. The grammar, the vocabulary, the writing style, all conform to projected evolution of English language. The personal details mentioned in the journal match no current records, suggesting they refer to people not yet born. The technological references describe systems we have not invented, but that follow logical development from our current research. Everything points to this being genuine writing from humanity's future." The chamber erupted in discussion. Dozens of species talking, arguing, speculating in languages that ranged from melodic to harsh to completely silent electromagnetic pulses. Jake sat quietly, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of what his simple observation had triggered. He had just been trying to be helpful. Now he was at the center of the biggest mystery in galactic history. Professor Kelren entered the chamber and made his way to the human delegation. He had been invited to present his findings. The Vexian scholar looked tired, his scales slightly dulled from lack of rest. "I have spent 72 hours analyzing every possible explanation," he told the council once the chamber quieted. "I have consulted with experts in temporal physics, quantum mechanics, and dimensional theory. I have reviewed every instance of language convergence in galactic history. My conclusion is uncomfortable but unavoidable. This tablet was written by humans from Earth's future, and somehow it ended up millions of years in our past. The smoke-like delegate pulsed angrily. Time travel is impossible. Every civilization that has tried has failed. The universe does not permit paradoxes. I did not say time travel. Professor Kelrin corrected gently. I said the tablet moved through time. The mechanism is unknown, but the evidence is conclusive. Dr. Hayes activated a holographic display, showing the translated text beside the original symbols. Catherine Wells wrote about landing on a moon in a distant sector. She described the landscape, the color of the sky, the geological features. We checked. The moon exists exactly where she described it, with exactly the features she mentioned. The tablet was found there, buried in sediment that formed millions of years ago. She was there. Somehow, impossibly, she was there. A new delegate spoke, one Jake had not seen before. It looked almost human, but with skin that shifted between colors and eyes that were entirely black. If humans from the future left this artifact, might there be others? Other messages, other warnings, other technology? The question hung in the air like a physical thing. Ben Foster's expression remained neutral, but Jake saw his jaw tighten slightly. This was what the commander had been worried about. The implications for power, for weapons, for control. Lisa nodded slowly. That is what we need to determine. We request access to the Galactic archives. Every artifact that has been classified as unknown or undecipherable. If there are more human writings scattered through time, we need to find them and understand what they tell us. The Vexian representative considered this. You understand that many of these artifacts are considered sacred by their discoverers? That some are classified for security reasons? That opening the archives could create diplomatic incidents? We understand, Lisa said. But if there are warnings from the future hidden in your vaults, warnings about threats or disasters, would you want them to remain unread? The council debated for hours. Jake listened to arguments in languages he could not understand, watched species he had never seen before vote on humanity's request. Some delegates worried about giving humans access to potentially dangerous information. Others argued that if the future was trying to send messages backward, those messages needed to be heard. Still others suggested the entire situation was some kind of elaborate test of the council's wisdom. Finally, the Vexian representative called for a vote. The result was narrow but decisive. Humanity would be granted limited access to the archives, supervised by council observers. They would have 6 standard months to search for additional human artifacts and report their findings. As the session ended and delegates began to depart, Professor Kelrin approached the human team. I have volunteered to serve as your primary supervisor, he told them. I hope you do not mind. This mystery has consumed me. I must know the truth. Lisa smiled and extended her hand in the human gesture of agreement. Professor Kelrin carefully grasped it with one of his 4 hands, having learned the custom. We would be honored to work with you, Professor. Your expertise will be invaluable. Jake stood and stretched, his back aching from hours in the uncomfortable chair. So we are going to search through millions of ancient artifacts looking for human writing that should not exist? That is exactly what we are going to do, Ben Foster said, and despite his serious demeanor, there was a hint of excitement in his voice. We are going to find out what the future was trying to tell us. They left the council chamber together, an unlikely team brought together by an impossible mystery. Somewhere in the vast archives of the galactic community, more messages waited. More warnings, more clues, more pieces of a puzzle that should not exist. Catherine Wells had written her journal 600 years in the future and 4 million years in the past. What she and others like her were trying to say might determine the fate of humanity, and perhaps the entire galaxy. Jake thought about the woman whose words he had read. She had written about missing home, about hope, about building something wonderful among the stars. She had no idea that her simple journal would become the most important archaeological find in galactic history. He wondered what she would think if she knew that her words would echo across millions of years, to give her ancestors a chance to change everything. The mystery was just beginning, and Jake Morrison, who had only wanted to deliver supply manifests, was now at the center of the most important investigation in human history. The Galactic archives stretched deeper than Jake had imagined possible. Level after level descended into the heart of the station, each floor dedicated to artifacts from different eras and regions of space. The air grew colder as they went down, preserved at temperatures ideal for preventing decay. Automated systems hummed quietly, maintaining perfect conditions for objects that had survived millions of years, only to be cataloged and forgotten in these silent halls. Dr. Lisa Hayes walked beside Professor Kelrin, her portable scanner active and recording everything they passed. Commander Ben Foster brought up the rear, his military instincts keeping him alert even in this scholarly environment. Jake led the group, following the directory system that listed thousands of undeciphered artifacts waiting for someone to unlock their secrets. The scope of it overwhelmed him. How were they supposed to find human writing among millions of alien relics? Professor Kelrin seemed to read his thoughts. "We will be systematic," the Vexian scholar said calmly. "The archive system categorizes unknown scripts by symbol complexity and pattern type. We can filter for writing systems that might match human linguistic structures. It will still take time, but we are not searching blindly." They reached Archive Section 7, a vast chamber filled with transparent cases holding tablets, scrolls, data crystals, and objects whose purpose Jake could not even guess. A Threen archivist floated nearby, its crystalline form refracting the soft lighting into rainbow patterns on the walls. The being communicated through a translation device, its voice flat and emotionless. "You have clearance to examine Category 9 artifacts. These are items classified as linguistically complex but culturally unknown. Please handle all materials according to preservation protocols." Lisa approached the first case, peering at a metallic sheet covered in flowing symbols. She studied it for a moment, then shook her head. Definitely not human. The symbol structure is too geometric. They moved through the section methodically, examining artifact after artifact. Hours passed. Jake's feet began to hurt. Most of the items were clearly alien, their writing systems based on concepts that human minds would never have developed. But then Lisa stopped abruptly in front of a small stone fragment, her hand pressed against the transparent case. "Jake," she said quietly, "look at this one." He moved to her side and felt his breath catch. The symbols carved into the stone were stylized and worn by time, but unmistakable. Chinese characters, ancient in style but clearly human in origin. Lisa's hands trembled slightly as she activated the case's retrieval system, carefully extracting the fragment with specialized tools. She laid it on an examination table and adjusted her scanner. "This is Mandarin Chinese," she confirmed. "The characters are using a classical style that fell out of use centuries ago, but someone deliberately chose to write in an archaic form. It says Day 43 of the expedition. Water reserves holding steady. Chen reports the native plants are edible with proper preparation. We may not need the hydroponic systems after all. This world could sustain us." Ben Foster leaned in, his expression intense. "Date, location? Anything identifying?" Lisa studied the fragment carefully, noting every detail. "No date visible on this piece. It looks like part of a larger tablet that broke apart. The archive records say it was found on a planet in the outer spiral, dated to approximately 3 million years old." Professor Kelrin's 4 hands moved rapidly over his datapad, cross-referencing the information. "That planet is currently uninhabited. Survey teams found no signs of advanced civilization, just ruins so old they were assumed to be geological formations." They continued searching with renewed energy. Within the next hour, they found 3 more artifacts: a metal plate with Spanish text describing crop yields, a ceramic tile with Hindi script noting astronomical observations, a crystalline sheet with Arabic writing about establishing a mining operation. Each piece was millions of years old. Each piece described human activities that had not yet happened. Each piece came from a different world in a different sector of space. Jake spread a star chart across a table and began marking the locations where each artifact had been discovered. Lisa and Ben worked alongside him, adding data points as they found more pieces. By the end of the first day, they had identified 17 artifacts in 7 different human languages. When Jake connected the locations on the chart, Ben noticed it first. "That's not random distribution," the commander said, his finger tracing the pattern. "Look at the spacing. Look at how they form clusters around certain regions. This is deliberate placement." Professor Kelrin adjusted the chart display, adding layers of galactic data. "These regions have unusual properties. High concentrations of rare elements, naturally occurring wormhole phenomena, gravitational anomalies. Every artifact location corresponds to something scientifically significant." Lisa pulled up another file, her expression growing more concerned as she read. "I found something else in the archive records. There's a larger artifact that was classified differently, because it contained mathematical equations rather than clear linguistic content. But look at these symbols in the margins. The hologram showed what appeared to be a technical manual fragment. Most of it was covered in complex diagrams and mathematical formulas that made Jake's head hurt to look at. But in the margins, written small and neat, were English words. Lisa highlighted them and began reading. Warning: dimensional fold equation must account for cumulative spacetime degradation. Initial tests showed no problems, but cascade effects emerge after threshold reached. Do not exceed safe parameters. Lives depend on proper calculations. And then there's a signature. It says Engineer Pete Grant, Deep Space Research Vessel Newton. Ben Foster stood up straighter. That sounds like a warning about some kind of technology. Technology we don't have yet. Professor Kelrin was already analyzing the mathematical equations, his scholar's mind working through concepts that would take human scientists years to understand. These formulas describe a method of traveling through space by folding it, he said slowly. Not moving through space, but compressing the distance between 2 points. This would revolutionize galactic travel. Current faster-than-light methods are crude compared to this, but there are symbols here I do not understand. Warning markers built into the mathematics itself. Lisa photographed everything, her scientific training keeping her focused, despite the magnitude of what they were finding. We need Thrin, she said. He's a physicist. He might be able to interpret these equations better than we can. Jake contacted the insectoid researcher, who arrived within the hour, Thrin's compound eyes fixed on the mathematical formulas, his antennae twitching with concentration. He studied them in silence for long minutes while the others waited. Finally, he made a clicking sound that his translator rendered as distressed confusion. These equations describe dimensional folding, yes, Thrin confirmed, but they also describe something else, something terrible. Each fold creates a small rupture in spacetime, individually harmless, healing quickly. But if too many folds occur too rapidly in certain configurations, the ruptures compound. They reinforce each other. They cascade backward through time, creating a temporal shockwave that could displace matter across millions of years. The implications settled over the group like a physical weight. Lisa spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. Catherine Wells and her crew. The Chinese expedition. All these people we've been finding. They didn't travel back in time deliberately. They were caught in a temporal disaster caused by the very technology that let them reach these distant worlds. Ben Foster's military mind immediately grasped the strategic picture. Future humanity develops this dimensional folding technology. It's incredible, revolutionary, lets them expand across the galaxy rapidly. But they don't know about the cascade effect until it's too late. Colonies, ships, entire expeditions get thrown millions of years into the past. These artifacts are all that remains of people who were displaced from their own time. Professor Kelrin examined the warning notation again. Engineer Grant knew. Someone figured out what was happening and tried to warn others. But the catastrophe had already begun. These artifacts are not just relics. They are warnings sent back through the very disaster they describe. Jake looked at the star chart again, at the pattern of artifact locations forming a network across the galaxy. They marked the dangerous zones, he realized. Every artifact is placed where the cascade effect would be strongest. They're showing us where not to use this technology when we eventually develop it. Lisa added another layer to the chart, showing gravitational fields and spatial anomalies. The artifact locations aligned perfectly with regions where spacetime was already naturally stressed. If humanity creates dimensional folds in these areas, the mathematics suggest it would trigger the cascade. But if we avoid these specific coordinates, if we understand the safe parameters, maybe we could use the technology without causing the disaster. Thrin clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. The equations contain both the weapon and the shield. The knowledge to create dimensional folding and the knowledge to use it safely, but only if interpreted correctly. One mistake and humanity could doom itself to the same fate as these future colonists. Ben Foster crossed his arms, his expression grim. We need to find all the artifacts. Every single one. We need to map every dangerous zone and understand exactly what these warnings are telling us. Because eventually, whether it's in 100 years or 1,000, humanity will develop this technology. When that day comes, we need to know how to use it without destroying ourselves. Professor Kelrin began compiling their findings into a report for the Galactic Council. This changes everything, he said. We thought we were studying ancient history. Instead, we are reading warnings from the future. Humanity is being given a gift that no other species has ever received. The chance to learn from mistakes that have not yet been made. Jake thought about Catherine Wells again, writing in her journal about the beautiful violet sky and her hopes for humanity's future. She had no idea that her words and her fate would become a warning beacon across millions of years. She had died thinking she was building humanity's legacy. In a way, she was right. Just not the legacy she imagined. The team worked through the night, documenting every artifact they found and analyzing the patterns that emerged. By morning, they had identified 43 separate pieces of evidence, 43 messages from a future that must never be allowed to happen, 43 warnings that humanity would need to remember for centuries to come. The mystery was becoming clearer, but with clarity came responsibility. They now knew what was coming, and that knowledge meant they had to find a way to prevent it. The breakthrough came during their 4th week in the archives. Lisa had been searching through a section dedicated to items so damaged or degraded that most archivists had given up hope of ever understanding them. She found it in a container marked with symbols indicating extreme age and fragility, a device that looked like nothing more than twisted metal and corroded circuits at first glance. But something about its design made her pause. The shape was wrong for alien technology. The proportions felt human. She called the others immediately. Jake arrived first, followed quickly by Professor Kelrin and Ben Foster. Thrin was conducting experiments in another section, but responded to the urgent summons. They gathered around the examination table where Lisa had carefully placed the artifact under specialized lighting. Ben leaned closer, his military experience recognizing what the others had missed. "That's a data storage device," he said with certainty. "Late 28th or early 29th century design based on the architecture. We don't have anything quite like this yet, but I've seen proposals for similar systems in defense research files." Professor Kelrin consulted the archive records on his datapad. This item was recovered from a debris field in deep space. The debris was dated to approximately 2.8 million years old. It was cataloged as unidentifiable technology and placed in storage 40 years ago. No one has examined it since. Lisa's hands moved carefully over her scanner, analyzing the device's internal structure without touching it directly. The outer casing is almost completely destroyed, but the core memory storage might still be intact. If we can access it without causing further damage, we might find actual data files instead of just written messages. Thrin arrived and immediately began setting up specialized equipment. "We must be extremely careful," the insectoid physicist warned. "This device has survived millions of years through sheer luck. Any mistake in the recovery process could destroy whatever information remains." They worked for 6 hours straight, using techniques that combined human data recovery methods with alien preservation technology. Jake watched nervously as Thrin and Lisa collaborated, their expertise from completely different scientific traditions somehow complementing each other perfectly. Professor Kelrin monitored energy readings, his 4 hands moving across multiple control panels simultaneously. Ben stood guard, though against what threat Jake could not imagine, perhaps against their own impatience. Finally, Lisa made a small sound of triumph. "I have a connection. The core memory is fragmented but partially readable. I'm routing it through translation protocols now." A holographic display flickered to life above the examination table. The image was corrupted, breaking apart into static every few seconds before reassembling. A human face appeared. A man with gray hair and tired eyes wearing what looked like a military uniform from a century that had not yet arrived. His voice came through distorted, words cutting in and out as the damaged recording struggled to play. "This is Admiral Richard Cole of the Earth Colonial Fleet. Service number 773942, Alpha. If anyone finds this message, you need to know what happened to us. You need to understand what we did wrong so you never repeat our mistakes." The image dissolved into static for several seconds, then returned. "The year is 3104. Humanity has spread to 378 colony worlds using dimensional fold technology. We thought we had conquered the galaxy. We thought we were unstoppable." The recording broke apart again. When it resumed, the Admiral's face looked older, more haggard. "We didn't see the cascade effect coming. The mathematics said it was safe. Every test showed no problems, but we didn't test long-term accumulation. We didn't understand that each fold left a tiny scar on space-time. Individually harmless, but we were making thousands of folds every day. The scars started to reinforce each other, spreading backward through time like cracks in glass." Lisa increased the power to the playback system, trying to stabilize the signal. The Admiral continued, his voice growing more urgent. The first displacement event caught a mining colony in the Kepler sector. 3,000 people, suddenly thrown back 800,000 years. We thought it was a freak accident. We were wrong. The displacements began happening faster. Entire ships, stations, colony worlds, all of them ripped out of our time and scattered across millions of years into the past. The image showed the Admiral standing now, pointing to something off-screen. We tried to stop using the dimensional folds, but it was too late. The cascade had achieved critical mass. It was feeding on itself, growing stronger with each displacement. Our scientists calculated that before it burns out, the temporal shock wave will have displaced approximately 60% of human civilization backward through time. Jake felt his blood run cold. 60%. Hundreds of millions of people, maybe billions, all thrown into the past to live and die in a time before humanity existed. Catherine Wells and her crew were just the beginning. The Chinese expedition, the Spanish colonists, Engineer Grant and his warnings, all of them were part of a catastrophe so vast it defied comprehension. The recording continued, the Admiral's voice breaking with emotion. I'm recording this on every type of media I can find. I'm sending copies on every ship that might survive the displacement. My hope? My only hope is that some of these recordings make it far enough back that our ancestors will find them, that you will find them and learn what we did wrong. Professor Kelrin's scales had turned a pale silver, a sign of deep distress in his species. The scope of this disaster is beyond anything in recorded galactic history. The Admiral's image stabilized for a moment, his expression showing determination despite his obvious exhaustion. The dimensional fold technology is revolutionary. It can unite the galaxy, but it must be used carefully with full understanding of the cumulative effects. We've included technical data with this message. Safe parameters, dangerous zones, everything we learned too late. The artifacts you've been finding, the tablets and fragments, those are messages from people who were displaced. We told them to leave markers, to warn the past about the danger zones where space-time is already stressed. The recording began to break up more severely, whole sections corrupting into white noise. The Admiral's voice came through in fragments. The cascade is accelerating now. My own ship may be displaced at any moment. I don't know if this message will survive. I don't know if it will matter, but I have to try. Humanity deserves a chance to do this right, to reach the stars without destroying itself. The image flickered one final time. If you're watching this, you're living in the past. Our past, your present. You have time. You have warning. The technology will come. The temptation will be irresistible. But please, I'm begging you from the future, from the disaster we created, please be more careful than we were. Please learn from our mistakes. Please don't let this happen again. The recording ended abruptly, leaving only static and silence. The team stood motionless around the examination table, the weight of what they had just witnessed pressing down on them. Lisa was crying quietly, tears running down her face as she thought about all those displaced people dying alone in the past. Ben's jaw was clenched so tight Jake could see the muscles jumping. Thrin's antennae drooped in a gesture of mourning. Professor Kelrin's 4 hands hung limp at his sides. Jake was the first to speak, his voice hoarse. He said they included technical data with the message. Can we recover it? Lisa wiped her eyes and turned back to her instruments. I can try. Give me a few minutes. She worked in silence while the others waited. The archive level felt colder now, as if the temperature had dropped with the revelation of humanity's future failure. Jake thought about Admiral Cole, recording his message knowing that he might be displaced at any moment, knowing that he was already living in the apocalypse he was trying to prevent. Lisa made a small noise of success. I have partial data files, schematics for the dimensional fold drives, mathematical models showing safe usage parameters, maps of the galaxy marking danger zones where folds should never be created, lists of the colonies that were displaced and when they were sent back. It's not complete, but it's enough to understand what went wrong and how to prevent it. Ben took a deep breath, his military training reasserting itself. We need to present this to the Council immediately. This is bigger than just humanity. If one species' technology can create temporal cascades, the entire galaxy needs to understand the threat. Professor Kelrin was already composing a message on his datapad. I will arrange an emergency session. The Council must see this recording. They must understand what humanity faces and what it means for galactic safety. Thrin studied the technical data, his physicist's mind parsing information that would take human scientists years to fully comprehend. The dimensional fold technology is brilliant, he said quietly. It could advance galactic civilization by centuries, but the margin for error is razor-thin. One miscalculation, one ignored warning, and the cascade begins. There is no way to stop it once it reaches critical mass. Jake looked at the frozen image of Admiral Cole on the display, the exhausted face of a man trying to save people who would not be born for centuries. He gave us a chance, Jake said. All of them did. Catherine Wells, Engineer Grant, all the displaced colonists who left messages. They died millions of years ago trying to warn us. We can't waste that sacrifice. Lisa began copying all the recovered data onto secure storage. This is the most important archaeological find in human history. We have documentation of a future disaster complete with technical details on how to prevent it. We have a responsibility to make sure this information survives and is remembered for as long as humanity exists. Ben nodded grimly. We'll need protocols, fail-safes, education systems to make sure every human understands the risks before we ever develop this technology. This needs to become part of our cultural memory, something we never forget no matter how many centuries pass. Professor Kelrin sent his message to the council and received an immediate response. They will convene in 6 hours. We should prepare our presentation. This will change everything, not just for humanity but for every species in the galaxy. You are about to show them that the future is not fixed, that warnings can cross time itself, and that catastrophe can be prevented if we have the wisdom to listen. They left the archive level together, carrying with them the weight of knowledge that no civilization should have to bear. They knew the future. They knew the mistakes that would be made. They knew the price of arrogance and the value of caution. Admiral Cole's message had reached across millions of years and hundreds of generations to give humanity one precious gift, the chance to do better, to be wiser, to reach for the stars without destroying themselves in the process. Now they had to convince the galaxy that this impossible message from an impossible future deserved to be heard and heeded. The Galactic Council chamber was silent as Admiral Cole's message played for the assembled delegates. Jake watched their reactions, seeing shock ripple across species that had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations for thousands of years. Even beings that had seemed unshakable now showed signs of deep disturbance. When the recording ended, the silence stretched for a full minute before anyone spoke. The Vexian representative was the first to break the quiet, her voice measured but showing strain. We have witnessed something unprecedented, a message from the future warning of a catastrophe that has not yet occurred. The implications are staggering for every species in this chamber, not just humanity. The Threen delegates' crystalline form pulsed with agitated light. This technology could transform galactic civilization. The ability to fold space would make travel instantaneous. Trade, communication, exploration all would advance beyond our current limitations, yet the price of misuse is unthinkable. A delegate from the Kafar homeworld, speaking through bubbles in its methane tank, raised a concern that Jake had been dreading. How do we know this is not a human strategy to gain technological advantage? They could claim this future disaster to justify restricting research while secretly developing the technology themselves. Ben Foster stood, his military bearing evident, but his voice diplomatic. That concern is understandable but misses the point. We are sharing everything we found, including the complete technical specifications for dimensional fold technology. We are not hiding anything. We are asking for cooperation, not control. Dr. Lisa Hayes activated a holographic display showing all 43 artifacts they had documented. Every piece of evidence we found is available for independent verification. The tablets, the fragments, Admiral Cole's recording, all of it can be examined by your own experts. We want transparency because we understand the stakes. This is not about human advantage. This is about preventing a disaster that would affect the entire timeline. Professor Kelrin stood beside the human delegation, his forearms gesturing to emphasize his points. I have spent my entire career studying ancient civilizations. I have never encountered anything like this. The evidence is conclusive. Future humanity experienced a temporal catastrophe and left warnings scattered across millions of years. The question now is what we do with this knowledge. The smoke-like delegate drifted forward, its voice cautious. Assuming we accept this evidence as genuine, what action do you propose? We cannot simply forbid research into dimensional folding. Scientific progress cannot be stopped by fear. Lisa took a breath and presented the proposal she had been working on for the past 6 hours. We do not suggest stopping research. We suggest doing it correctly from the beginning. Humanity will share all technical data from Admiral Cole's files with the galactic scientific community. In return, we ask for a joint development program with representatives from multiple species. Safety protocols will be designed collaboratively. Testing will be transparent. Most importantly, the danger zones marked by the displaced colonists will be declared forbidden zones. No dimensional folds will ever be created in those regions of space. Thrin stepped forward, his insectoid form clicking with nervous energy.
I have analyzed the technical data extensively.
The mathematics are sound but complex. The cascade effect only occurs when specific conditions are met. High fold density, proximity to gravitational anomalies, and cumulative degradation of spacetime over time. If we understand these factors and control for them, the technology can be used safely. The future humans failed because they did not know these limits. We have the advantage of their warning. Ben added the military perspective. We also propose establishing the Temporal Safety Commission, an independent body with authority to monitor dimensional fold usage and enforce safety protocols. Every species that develops this technology would be required to register their fold drives and submit to regular inspections. The commission would have representatives from all major civilizations to ensure no single species controls the process. The chamber erupted in discussion. Delegates argued in dozens of languages about sovereignty, safety, trust, and the balance between progress and caution. Jake listened to the debate, understanding that they were witnessing the birth of something new. The galactic community had always been loosely organized, with each species largely independent. What Lisa and Ben proposed was real cooperation, real shared responsibility for technology that could affect everyone. The Vexian representative called for order, and the chamber quieted. This proposal has merit, but it raises difficult questions. Who decides what constitutes safe usage? Who has authority to enforce restrictions? What happens if a species refuses to comply? Lisa had anticipated these questions. The commission would operate on consensus among member species. Safety parameters would be based on the mathematical models from the future data, not political decisions. Enforcement would be collective. If a species violates protocols, they face sanctions from the entire galactic community. As for refusal to join, any species that develops dimensional folding independently would be taking a massive risk. The data shows clearly what happens when the technology is misused. Most rational civilizations would choose cooperation over catastrophe. Professor Kelrin added his support. I propose that the first commission members include humans for their unique knowledge of the warnings, Vexians for our linguistic and historical expertise, Threen for mathematical analysis, and Kafar for their experience with large-scale engineering projects. Other species would join as the program develops. This would be a truly collaborative effort. The debate continued for hours. Jake's legs ached from standing, but he remained focused. This was the most important negotiation in human history. The decisions made today would echo for centuries, determining whether humanity reached the stars safely or repeated the mistakes of their displaced descendants. Finally, after 8 hours of discussion, the Vexian representative called for a preliminary vote. The question was simple. Should the Galactic Council accept humanity's evidence as genuine and begin working toward the establishment of the Temporal Safety Commission? The vote was not unanimous, but it was decisive. 73 species voted in favor, 12 voted against, and 22 abstained pending further review of the evidence. The chamber erupted in a mixture of reactions. Some delegates celebrated, others looked troubled, many simply appeared exhausted. The Vexian representative struck a resonant gong that signaled the session's end. The council has spoken. Work will begin immediately on protocols for dimensional fold research and safety measures. Humanity will be commended for their transparency and wisdom in bringing this matter to our attention. As the delegates began to depart, several approached the human team personally. A young delegate from a species Jake did not recognize thanked them quietly. My civilization is only beginning to develop advanced physics. You may have saved us from making terrible mistakes centuries from now. We are grateful. Others were more skeptical, but even they acknowledged the importance of the warnings. The Kafar delegate, who had initially questioned human motives, spoke to Ben privately. I was wrong to doubt your intentions. It takes courage to share information that could have given your species enormous advantage. You have earned respect today." Professor Kelron gathered the team as the chamber emptied. "You should all be proud. You took an impossible discovery and turned it into an opportunity for cooperation." Catherine Wells would be pleased to know her journal entry accomplished so much. Lisa smiled tiredly. "We still have a lot of work ahead. Designing the safety protocols, establishing the commission, educating current and future generations about the risks. This is just the beginning." Jake thought about that. Beginning was the right word. Today marked the start of humanity's real integration into the galactic community, not as junior members learning from their elders, but as equals with unique knowledge to contribute. The tragedy that had scattered millions of humans across time had been transformed into wisdom that might save billions yet to be born. They left the council chamber and made their way back toward the research station. Jake stopped at an observation window, looking out at the stars scattered across the darkness. Somewhere out there were the worlds where Catherine Wells and her crew had died, where the Chinese expedition had planted their crops, where Engineer Grant had tried to warn his contemporaries. Those people were gone, lost to time beyond any hope of rescue, but their words remained. Their warnings survived. Ben stood beside him. "Thinking about them?" Jake nodded. "Admiral Cole said he hoped his message would reach far enough back that we could learn from it. It did, we heard him. Now we have to make sure we remember." Lisa joined them at the window. "We will. This becomes part of human culture now, part of our story. Every child will learn about the temporal displacement, about the people who were lost, about the warnings they left behind. We will carry this knowledge forward until the day comes when we actually develop dimensional folding. And when that day arrives, we will be ready." Professor Kelron approached, his scales gleaming in the starlight. "I have been thinking about what makes humanity special. Many species are intelligent, creative, capable of great achievements. But you have something unique now. You are the only species in the galaxy that has received direct communication from your own future. You know what mistakes you will make before you make them. That is an extraordinary gift and an enormous responsibility." Thrin clicked his agreement. "The mathematics suggest that by following the safety protocols and avoiding the danger zones, humanity can use dimensional folding safely for thousands of years. Your future is not fixed. The catastrophe Admiral Cole experienced does not have to happen. You have the power to change everything." Jake looked at his companions, this unlikely group that had become a team through shared discovery. A human administrator, a historian, a military commander, an alien scholar, and an insectoid physicist. Together they had unraveled the greatest mystery in galactic history and turned tragedy into hope. The work ahead would be difficult. There would be setbacks, disagreements, species that refused to cooperate. But for now, in this moment, Jake felt something he had not expected. He felt optimistic about humanity's future. They had been given a warning from people who paid the ultimate price to deliver it. They would honor that sacrifice by being wiser, more careful, more thoughtful than their future selves had been. They would reach for the stars, but they would do it the right way. Catherine Wells had written in her journal about humanity's legacy among the stars. She could not have imagined that her simple words would become the foundation for galactic cooperation and temporal safety. She had hoped to build something wonderful. In a way she never expected, she had succeeded. Her legacy was not the colony she never got to establish. It was the warning that would save billions of people who would never know her name, but would benefit from her unintended sacrifice. Jake placed his hand against the window, feeling the cold of space through the transparent barrier. Out there in the darkness, the future waited. A future that was no longer fixed, no longer certain, but full of possibility. Humanity would walk carefully now, guided by voices from tomorrow, carrying the weight of knowledge that transcended time itself. They would make mistakes, but not the same ones. They would face challenges, but with better wisdom. They would reach the stars, but they would do it together with the rest of the galaxy, building something that would last not just for centuries, but for millions of years. The ancient human writings would remain in the archives, no longer mysterious, but finally understood. They were not relics of a lost civilization. They were letters from the future, written by heroes whose names would be remembered forever. And humanity would honor them by making sure their warnings were never forgotten, and their sacrifice was never in vain.